My name is Chloe Thomas. I'm 24 years old, and if there's one lesson life taught me, it's this. The people who are supposed to protect you can sometimes become the ones you fear the most. For years, I believed that if I worked harder, loved harder, and sacrificed more, my family would finally see my worth. Instead, every sacrifice became another expectation. Every act of kindness became another obligation. I didn't realize how broken my life had become until one afternoon at St. Mary's Hospital, when my father humiliated me in front of dozens of strangers. That day didn't destroy me, it finally set me free. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, in a small two-story house my parents bought before I was born. My mother, Susan Thomas, was the kindest person I had ever known. She worked as an elementary school teacher, baked cookies for the neighbors every Christmas, and somehow always found a way to make our home feel safe. When I was 17, she suffered a massive stroke. She survived, but she was never the same. Her speech became limited, the right side of her body remained weak, and she needed constant care. My father, Richard Thomas, promised everyone he would stand beside her through recovery. For a few months, he did. Then everything changed. He started staying out late. He became impatient whenever Mom needed help. Eventually, most of her care fell on me. At 18, while my friends were preparing for college parties and road trips, I was learning how to administer medication, help my mother into a wheelchair, cook every meal, clean the house, and still attend nursing school. I never complained. She was my mom. She would have done the same for me. After graduating, I accepted a job as a registered nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved helping people through the worst days of their lives. Ironically, I could comfort complete strangers better than I could comfort my own family. Every month, I handed my father money for groceries, utilities, and my mother's medical supplies. He always accepted it without saying thank you. Whenever I bought something for myself, even a new pair of shoes, he would look at me with disappointment. Must be nice wasting money. I usually stayed quiet. Arguing never changed anything. One Friday morning, my phone rang just as I was finishing a 12-hour night shift. It was my father. "Where are you?" he demanded. "I'm leaving work. Come straight to the hospital." My heart skipped. "What happened?" "Your mother collapsed during physical therapy." Before I could ask another question, he hung up. I drove faster than I probably should have. Every red light felt like an eternity. When I reached the hospital, I ran toward the cardiac observation unit. Mom was awake. She looked tired, but smiled the moment she saw me. I squeezed her hand. "You're okay." She nodded weakly. The doctor explained her blood pressure had dropped suddenly, but thankfully there was no lasting damage. She would need observation overnight. Relief washed over me. Then I noticed my father standing near the window with his arms crossed. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't thank me for rushing over. Instead, he said, "We need to talk." I followed him into the hallway. He pulled out a folded envelope and shoved it into my hands. Inside was a typed document. At the top, in bold letters, were the words, "Monthly Household Agreement." I frowned. "What is this?" "Starting next month, you're paying $1,200. I looked at him in disbelief. $1,200? You live in my house. I already give you $800 every month. That's changing. Dad, I pay for Mom's medications too. That's your responsibility. My responsibility? You owe this family. I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. I've spent 6 years helping take care of Mom. So, I've postponed my own life. So, I've worked double shifts to keep food on the table. His expression never softened. You should be grateful I'm letting you stay. The words hit harder than I expected. For years, I had convinced myself that deep down, my father appreciated everything I did. Standing there in that hallway, I finally understood the truth. To him, I wasn't a daughter. I was another source of income. I folded the paper and handed it back. "I can't pay $1,200. His eyes narrowed. "Then pack your things." I blinked. "What?" "If you don't pay, you don't live under my roof." I lowered my voice, conscious of the patients walking past us. "We're standing outside Mom's hospital room." "I don't care. This isn't the time." It's exactly the time. Several nurses glanced in our direction before continuing down the hallway. I tried one last time. Can we discuss this after Mom comes home? No. I need time. You've had years. I took a deep breath. Dad, I can't give you money I don't have. For a few seconds, he simply stared at me. Then he laughed. Not because something was funny. Because he didn't believe I would ever stand up to him. If you can afford coffee every morning. I don't even buy coffee every morning. If you can afford that car. It's 7 years old. If you can afford your phone. I need it for work. He stepped closer. Excuses. I felt years of frustration rising inside me. No, Dad. They're facts. His face turned red. You've become selfish. I've spent my entire adult life taking care of this family. And now it's time to pay your share. I already do. No. He pointed toward the exit. You either pay what I say, or you get out. The hallway had grown strangely quiet. People weren't pretending not to listen anymore. They were watching. A young nurse I worked with looked at me with concern. I could feel my cheeks burning with embarrassment. I whispered, please, not here. My father ignored me. Instead, he pulled another folded paper from his jacket pocket. This is a 30-day notice. I looked at it in disbelief. You actually wrote an eviction notice? I had it prepared yesterday. You planned this. I plan everything. Before I could answer, my mother's room door slowly opened. She had heard the raised voices. Holding onto her walker, she stepped into the hallway. Her speech was still limited, but she managed to whisper one word. Richard. She looked from him to me. Then tears filled her eyes. She understood exactly what was happening. For the first time in years, I saw disappointment on her face. Not directed at me. At him. My father refused to meet her eyes. Instead, he turned his back on both of us. And at that exact moment, a hospital administrator walked toward us holding a thick file. He stopped in front of my father and calmly said, Mr. Thomas, we need to discuss the unpaid balance on your wife's treatment. There are some signatures on these financial forms that don't appear to match your wife's records. My father's face instantly lost all color. And I realized the argument about rent was only the beginning. I stood frozen as the hospital administrator held the file in front of my father. For the first time in years, Richard Thomas looked nervous. I think you've made a mistake, he said, forcing a smile. The administrator remained calm. I hope we have, sir. That's why we'd like to review these documents with you. Dad glanced at me, then at my mother. I'll handle this later. I'm afraid it can't wait, the administrator replied. Some of these forms authorized financial decisions regarding Mrs. Thomas's treatment. My heart skipped. What kind of financial decisions? Dad cut in before the administrator could answer. Chloe, stay out of it. The administrator looked at me. Are you Miss Chloe Thomas? Yes. Since you're listed as your mother's emergency contact, you have the right to be present if your mother wishes. Dad's jaw tightened. She doesn't need to be involved. My mother, still leaning on her walker, slowly raised her trembling hand and pointed at me. Then, with great effort, she whispered, Stay. It was one of the clearest words she had spoken in months. I walked to her side and gently held her arm. I'm here, Mom. The administrator led us into a private consultation room. He opened the file. Mr. Thomas, 3 months ago these documents authorized the cancellation of your wife's supplemental insurance policy. I frowned. Canceled. Dad crossed his arms. We couldn't afford it. The administrator nodded slightly. The issue isn't that it was canceled. The issue is that these forms appear to contain Mrs. Thomas's signature. He placed the paperwork on the table. I immediately recognized my mother's handwriting. Except, something wasn't right. The signature looked shaky, almost copied. My mother slowly looked at the paper before shaking her head. No, it was barely audible. The administrator looked at her kindly. Mrs. Thomas, did you sign this document yourself? She struggled to answer. Then she looked directly at me. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, No. The room fell silent. I slowly turned toward my father. Dad. He avoided my eyes. You forged Mom's signature? I did what I had to do. You lied? I was protecting this family. By canceling her insurance? We needed money. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You told me the insurance company raised the premiums. They did. That wasn't why you canceled it. He slammed his hand on the table. You don't know what it's like carrying this family. I stared at him in disbelief. Carrying this family? I've been working full-time. So have I. I've paid every utility bill for years. So have I. I've taken care of Mom every single day. His voice grew louder. And I've had to deal with everything else. The administrator quietly closed the file. Mr. Thomas, we'll need to investigate these signatures. Dad glared at him. You people think you're detectives now? No, sir. We're simply following hospital policy. Dad stormed out of the room without another word. The door slammed behind him. I looked at my mother. She had begun crying silently. I wrapped my arms around her as carefully as I could. I'm so sorry. She squeezed my hand. That simple gesture said more than words ever could. Later that evening, after Mom had fallen asleep, I sat alone in the hospital cafeteria. I couldn't stop replaying everything. The rent demand. The eviction notice. The forged signature. Nothing made sense anymore. Then someone gently placed a coffee on the table. I looked up. It was Dr. Ethan Brooks, one of the neurologists who had worked with my mother over the years. You look like you've had a rough day. I let out a tired laugh. That's one way to describe it. He sat across from me. I wasn't trying to overhear earlier. I smiled weakly. I figured. He hesitated before speaking again. Your mother talks about you. I looked surprised. Really? He nodded. Every appointment. He smiled. Even when she struggled to find words, she always managed to say your name. A tear rolled down my cheek. I don't think I've done enough. He looked at me with genuine kindness. Chloe, I've watched you care for your mother for years. You've done more than most people ever could. Those words broke something inside me. For years. I had been waiting for someone to notice. Not to praise me. Just to see me. After a few moments, Dr. Brooks stood. One piece of advice. I looked up. You can't keep saving someone who's determined to drown. He quietly walked away. I sat there long after my coffee had gone cold. His words stayed with me. The following morning, I stopped by the house before returning to the hospital. The front door was unlocked. Inside, everything looked normal. Too normal. Then I noticed several boxes sitting near the staircase. Each one had my name written across it. Chloe. I climbed the stairs. My bedroom door was open. Half the room was empty. My clothes. Books. Family photos. Everything had been packed into boxes. Dad had already started moving me out. I slowly walked downstairs carrying one of the boxes. My father was sitting in the living room watching television as if nothing had happened. You packed my things? You've got 30 days. I haven't agreed to leave. You will. I set the box on the floor. Where's Mom's jewelry? His expression changed instantly. What jewelry? The pearl necklace Grandma gave her. I don't know. The wedding ring she stopped wearing after the stroke. No idea. The wooden keepsake box she kept in her closet. He stood up. Stop accusing me. I'm asking. Well, stop. I walked toward my mother's bedroom. The closet door was already open. The top shelf was completely empty. Every keepsake she had treasured for decades was gone. I slowly turned around. Dad, what did you do with Mom's things? Before he could answer, someone knocked on the front door. I opened it. A sheriff's deputy stood outside holding an official envelope. Mr. Richard Thomas? Dad walked over. Yeah, you've been served. Dad took the envelope, ripped it open. And the color immediately drained from his face. I caught a glimpse of the first page. It wasn't from the hospital. It wasn't from the bank. It was from a law office. And across the top, in bold letters, were the words, Petition for emergency conservatorship of Susan Thomas. At the bottom of the page was the name of the person asking the court to protect my mother, Chloe Thomas. The moment I saw my name on those court papers, my father looked at me with pure disbelief. You did this, he demanded. I met his eyes without backing away. Yes. You think you can take your mother away from me? I'm trying to protect her. His face turned red. You've always wanted to turn her against me. I shook my head. No, Dad. You did that yourself. The sheriff's deputy stepped between us. Sir, I'd suggest reading the paperwork carefully. Without another word, the deputy walked back to his patrol car. Dad crumpled the papers in his fist. This is all your fault. I looked around the house that had once been filled with laughter. It became my responsibility the day you stopped acting like a husband. He didn't answer. For the first time in years. He had nothing to say. That afternoon, I met with my attorney, Laura Bennett. She had spent more than 20 years handling elder abuse and financial exploitation cases. After reviewing everything, the forged signatures, the canceled insurance policy, the eviction notice, and my father's financial records, she closed the folder. Chloe, this is much more serious than I expected. What happens now? We ask the court for temporary authority to make medical decisions for your mother until everything is investigated. I nodded. And the house? She sighed. The mortgage is months behind. I felt my stomach tighten. Dad never told me. He also failed to mention the second loan. I buried my face in my hands. I worked overtime for years because I thought we were struggling together. Laura leaned forward. You weren't struggling together. You were carrying everyone. Those words finally made me understand something. Love should never feel like a life sentence. 3 weeks later, the hearing arrived. The courtroom was quiet. My father sat at one table with his attorney. I sat at the other beside Laura. My mother was present in her wheelchair. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Over the next 2 hours, the court reviewed every document. Bank statements, medical records, insurance forms, photographs, even security footage from the hospital hallway showing my father shouting at me. Then the hospital administrator testified about the forged signatures. Finally, the judge turned toward my mother. Mrs. Thomas, if you're comfortable answering, who do you trust to make decisions for your care? The courtroom became completely silent. My mother slowly lifted her trembling hand. Without hesitation, she pointed at me. Tears filled my eyes. The judge nodded gently. I understand. An hour later, the decision was announced. Temporary conservatorship was granted to me. The court also ordered a financial investigation into my father's handling of my mother's money. As we walked out of the courtroom, Dad called after me. You think you've won? I stopped. No. I think Mom finally has someone protecting her. Then I kept walking. The next several months weren't easy. I moved my mother into a small rehabilitation center just 10 minutes from my apartment. The staff knew her by name. She smiled more. She laughed more. Every evening after work, I'd bring her dinner and we'd watch old movies together. Slowly, very slowly, she began speaking more clearly. One evening while we were sitting in the garden, she reached for my hand. She paused. She took another breath. Proud. My heart nearly stopped. She hadn't spoken a complete sentence in years. I'm proud of you. I wrapped my arms around her and cried harder than I ever had before. Those 4 words healed a part of me I thought was broken forever. Meanwhile, the investigation into my father uncovered the truth. He had secretly taken out loans, canceled insurance policies without permission, and sold several valuable family heirlooms. He wasn't arrested, but the court ordered him to repay what he could and permanently removed him from managing my mother's finances. Jason visited me a few weeks later. He looked different. Older. Tired. I owe you an apology. I stayed quiet. I believed everything Dad said. He lowered his head. I should have listened to you. I nodded slowly. I wanted a brother. You chose being his favorite instead. He didn't argue. Because he knew it was true. Over time, we rebuilt our relationship, not overnight, but one honest conversation at a time. Trust returned slowly. Nearly a year after the day my father tried to force me out of the house, I stood on the front porch of a small home. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't perfect. But it was mine. The keys felt heavier than they should have. Not because of their weight, but because of everything they represented. Freedom. Peace. A future I had built for myself. As I unlocked the front door, my mother smiled from her wheelchair. Home, she whispered. I smiled back. Yes, Mom. Home. That evening, we unpacked the last box. At the very bottom was an old family photo. It showed my parents holding me when I was only 3 years old. I looked at it for a long moment before placing it into a memory album. Not because I wanted to forget the past, but because I had finally learned to leave it there. Some wounds never disappear completely, but they don't have to control the rest of your life. I switched off the living room light and looked around the quiet house. For the first time in years, there were no arguments, no fear, no impossible expectations, only peace. And in that peaceful silence, I finally understood what my mother had been trying to teach me all along. A real home isn't the place where people demand your loyalty. It's the place where your love is returned without conditions. That was the day I stopped living for everyone else and finally started living for myself.